What's up, guys? It's Joe at National Sports Entertainment, and I don't want to play this video because of obvious reasons. I like to be very cautious after all the things we've had with the channel, but I wanted to, I mean, you can watch the video for yourself. I wanted to go into a few different reasons, and I've been saying this all year. Like, if you watch any, probably like every fourth or fifth NFL video, at some point I mentioned the Niners and I mentioned the Ravens, because the AFC, I'll be honest, I had two picks from the very beginning. It was either going to be the Raiders or Ravens. I had a feeling about the Raiders, who we're going to go into in a minute. But as far as the Super Bowl, this made sense for a plethora of reasons, and I'm going to go into them without trying to go all over the place. Now, the first reason, and this is a more recent one because obviously this just happened, but it just kind of reassures me that we are going to get Baltimore and San Francisco, is right in the very beginning here. I mean, just looking at the thumbnail, it's their thumbnail and the intro. You see San Francisco. Now you could go further with it and it looks like the building that San Francisco is logos on is being blown up. But we'll get down to the winner of the hypothetical Super Bowl later. But I want to go into the matchup, because San Francisco, Baltimore, the two guys you're seeing here, they're establishing these two teams. Now, you could just say they're the two best teams. But in this video, they actually they make a point of going through like the headquarters, and you'll see like an eagle or two. I think they show. I didn't even see Mahomes, and then everything else is Lamar. You see San Francisco logos, San Francisco guys, and it's 95% Ravens and Niners. Now, it is for the NFL Christmas party, so I get that. It's going to be focusing on the teams that played, which, again, they showed DeVito. So they did show the teams that played on this day, but it was just interesting how they really fixated on the Niners and Ravens. And I went into this before. They both played on Christmas, both of my picks. Celtics, Lakers is my one pick. And in the NFL, it's the Ravens-Niners. Now, let me go into another reason I like it, and this is, again, another recent reason. This white versus blacks Pro Bowl, which has been pushed around for quite a bit now. And it's one of those things which, obviously it's politically charged to an extent, and if this was reversed, I imagine the guy that said it would get a lot of flack. But I guess Mendenhall's, upset with the analyst, so he wants an all-white versus all-black Pro Bowl. Now, what's very interesting is, well, you see here they did the Bleacher Report. I think this is what they're talking about. At the end of the day, the all-black team Raiders took down the all-white team Cowboys. Interesting enough, they got the Cowboys in there. But I think that was just a simulation that they did on Madden or something. Now, the reason I find it interesting is they have people, placed in their rosters for the all-white and all-black Pro Bowl. And it's not, I guess there's no definitive roster, but what I found interesting about it is the fact that if you think about it, the Ravens and Niners fit that mold pretty darn perfectly. You'd be hard-pressed to find a whiter team than the 49ers. I guess the Patriots, there's teams with a good bit of white players, but, I mean, arguably the top four players on San Francisco are white. And Debo's probably better than Purdy, and you can make arguments, and Fred Warner is great, but at the end of the day, that's just rare in the NFL. Try finding other teams where that's the case. McCaffrey is the best player on the team, and he's obviously white. You got Purdy, who was being flirted for MVP. He's white. Kittle, who just literally brought up the script. If you didn't see that, just YouTube. George Kittle talks about script. He said, "Oh, the NFL scriptwriters did a great job." I wouldn't have predicted a 4-interception Purdy. Well, guess what? We predicted it. We predicted the injury too. I mean, if you want to watch that video. And it's because they ran the same narrative last year. But back to my point. Bosa, Purdy, Kittle, McCaffrey, guys on the line. They have a pretty white team. And then this is something that the NFL, ESPN, probably people above them decided to create, and I think they're creating it for the Super Bowl. Last year, it was the two first black quarterbacks. They decided that Mahomes would be black when he played Hurts. When it's fitting, he'll be a white guy. Just kind of like Kaepernick. They just decide when they want him to be white or black. Again, I think it's all just to push a narrative. But my point is, you look at the Ravens, and they, in my opinion, just not only if you think about Baltimore, it's one of the most. That's another thing. The cities themselves, San Francisco and Baltimore. San Francisco has a very high white population, and Baltimore has a very high black population. Again, of the good teams in the league, I would argue Baltimore has the highest black population. I think, yeah, it's higher than Philly. I'm from Philly, and I'm pretty sure Baltimore has this beat. So you got the MVP, Lamar Jackson would be the first. I think he would be. I think Hurts might have been. But I think Lamar would be, because I know Mahomes is mixed and all these other guys were mixed. I think Lamar would be the first full-fledged black quarterback. I could be mistaken. You can correct me. I know we had Doug Williams and Donovan. Obviously, they didn't win it. But I feel like it's slightly a different story with Lamar, the way they push him. And you just think of the team. You think of whether it's current guys, Zay Flowers, all their top guys, whether it's Queen on defense, or if you think about the past. You don't think of any great white Ravens, at least I don't. You think of Chris McAllister, you think of, yeah, freaking Ray Lewis, Ed Reed. I just don't, not a lot of white guys come to mind. Jamal Lewis. So, I know it seems like a reach, but I genuinely think they do this. It's marketability. In Baltimore, it wouldn't make sense. It's the same reason Boston has a bunch of white guys. And they've changed that up as of late. But why do you think they brought in Porzingis? And they had Borgone for a while and Scalabrine. So they've been doing this in sports for a while. But I think it's a very interesting narrative, the all-white versus the all-black quarterback narrative, just because, again, of the fact that we have, in my opinion, so many of these different caveats that are leading to... Let me get this out of the way. Phone spazzing out. There we go. All these different caveats that are leading to what seems to be a 49ers-Ravens Super Bowl. And the reasons I really went into it, the reason that before they even brought in the race card, which a lot of people were bringing to my attention, that they're going to have some kind of racial, especially with it being a political year, some kind of racial undertonings to the matchup. But even if you look at the quarterback matchup, we kind of saw a preview of it, I feel like, and I think it's going to be a lot different in the Super Bowl. But they had the goofy white guy who really would not make an NFL team by any analytics report or any scouting report. He was literally Mr. Irrelevant, versus the MVP, who in the modern day is your, if you build him from the ground up, quarterback, as far as a dual threat and ridiculously athletic. They pitch Purdy as this, nice, humble guy. They pitch Lamar as an outspoken guy, held out for his, didn't want to play for the team. So it all kind of ties together pretty well, in my opinion. And then what's also really interesting is I keep bringing up the 2-2, the 2-1, the 2-1-2, 1-2-2. 2-1-2 came up with Brock Purdy a lot, and I brought it up how that was actually Undertaker's streak when Lesnar beat him. He became 21-1, and then 21-2. That number comes up all the time, almost as much as the 1-2-6. And Lamar moved to 20-1 against the NFC, so he can move to 21-1, which again is the Brock record, which is interesting because he'd be going up against Brock, or 20-2, which again is just an inversion of Undertaker's record. So again, win or loss, we can get into that. Beginning of the year, I had the Niners all year long. If it does wind up being Niners-Ravens, like I thought, not much would get me off the Niners. But there's a couple things that would. But I just find it interesting. You're going to have, and I think this is the goal of the NFL. They want white people chanting for Purdy and black people chanting for Baltimore and Lamar. It's just a very subtle way of again, prompting some sort of racial divide. Something we don't need, but unfortunately we are going to be spoon-fed. But yeah, you throw in a lot of different things. Like I said, the redemption for San Francisco, especially after they just got beat down. We predicted a beatdown in my video. And again, not to be braggadocious, but we literally predicted Purdy getting injured. It's not the first time. If you remember in the past, we predicted exactly when Tua was going to get his concussion because they were planting seeds leading up to it. And they did the same with Purdy, saying, oh, he's going to finally get hit in the mouth. And what better team? Like outside of Pittsburgh, who was week 1, so that wasn't going to happen. Baltimore made the most sense. Maybe Dallas, but that was early in the season to really hit him in the mouth. So I think we get the redemption angle with Purdy versus Lamar. It checks the black and white box. We have George Kittle talking about scripts, and I have a feeling he's a part of a big script. We have all of the deaths that happened with Baltimore at the beginning of the year and last year. Part of the reason I liked Baltimore last year, and then after they rug pulled Lamar, I said we'll wait a few weeks into the season, and we're going to know if they're going to rug pull him again, or if the whole reason they had that whole divide before the season was so all the money can come in on Kansas City, Buffalo. Don't forget, there's so much money, and because the future payouts usually pay better in the beginning of the season, there was so much more money flying in on other teams that even if money's coming in on Baltimore now, it probably won't be enough for people to really get paid out. So I still think they're a great team to make the Super Bowl. So with the deaths, I didn't ignore that. You had Ray Lewis's son. Again, very interesting circumstances. I don't know if they ever actually gave a reason. I'm sure we all have our conjectures, but there does seem to be commonalities. Jalen Ferguson, who, by the way, I think he died on Kobe's birthday. I think he was 126. I went into Tony Saragusa. I did a whole video on him because his was very interesting. He was in The Sopranos, and the finale of The Sopranos was 621 and 622. Season 6, 21, Season 6, Episode 22. And Saragusa died on June 22nd. The same date that Tony Soprano died. And Saragusa was in The Sopranos, played as Soprano's bodyguard. So it was really interesting that it lined up. And there's more interesting things that went into Saragusa's death. Now, that was last season, but then again, this season we had a few more. And a lot of people were talking about symbolism. So it's nothing concrete. But I thought that Bleacher Report video was very interesting because they just solely focused on the Niners and Ravens. There was hardly any focus on any other team. And again, I do understand the emphasis on the Christmas Day games, and that's why those teams got attention. But again, you'd think the Eagles would have got a little more attention. It's not like they're a scrub team. And for the logo to be the San Francisco logo on the building, I thought was interesting as well. It just seemed like another giveaway, and Lamar was the main guy in the whole thing. So those were the teams that were heavily emphasized. So really, these next 2 weeks, whatever happens, nothing's going to change my mind. I still think the Niners aren't going to get the first pick in the draft. I'm sorry, not first pick in the draft. I still don't think they're going to get the first round bye. I think another team's going to sweep that from them. I did a ranking video just a few weeks, not even weeks ago, a couple videos ago, maybe a week or so, going into, I think it was the beginning of week 16, and I just went into how I thought the season would finish out, and I thought the Niners would lose a couple because, again, it makes perfect sense, because then you have the redemption angle for Purdy, you have the rematch of the Blackout Bowl, which again, you had Beyonce, who was a part of that, and obviously she still is a big name, so they could always bring her back, do something with her. But the whole thing was very interesting, and yeah, when I saw Kittle talking about the script, it just seemed like more tongue-in-cheek humor from the NFL. But yeah, to me, kind of what really reassures it is this idea of, a black versus white bowl. I suppose the Lions could fit the bill in the NFC side, but again, it's Detroit. I mean, it's not really a white city, and outside of their quarterback, they're not really a white team. Again, this isn't the thing that we typically focus on, but when they continuously talk about it, of course, it's going to be a topic that we talk about. But you look down the list of teams, you don't have, again, you have, I'd say, a few teams that are your white teams. The Colts have always been a white team. The Patriots, for sure, have always been a white team. The Bucks have always been a pretty white team. Actually, the Bucks have always been pretty darn mixed down the middle, where they had like stars like half their stars were white. Like they had John Lynch and Allstott, but then they had like Sapp and Keyshawn. So the Bucks have always been interesting that way. But I think you get my point. And if you look at the cities, they always market for the most part to that city as far as the demographics of the players. But yeah, I think it's really interesting, and especially because again the articles coming out, the fact they played on Christmas with again the Lakers Celtics, who are just people know their dynasties really well. The Niners just got pounded by the Ravens. They were really given some Super Bowl preview vibes, even though it wasn't a close game by any means. The physicality of it all seemed to hit a little bit differently. And I just think with all the symbolism, especially now, I don't think the black and white Pro Bowl talk's going to stop anytime soon. I think they're going to just parlay that straight into the the Super Bowl, and then they can say, oh well, we got our white versus black quarterback, white versus black running back, whatever. Mostly white guys versus mostly black guys as far as stars, and the Niners fit the bill, the Ravens fit the bill, the cities fit the bill as far as the demographic. And then again, coming into a political season, you have to remember, I say this all the time, these are the same people that wrote Mickey Mouse. They own ABC. They want to push news as much as they want to push sports. So, yeah, I just found that all very interesting. I've done several videos on it, but I think it'd be a good time just to officially say again, if you wanted to lock that exact matchup, it's probably still got to be around 10-1 because each team individually is still getting good odds on their own. So I can't imagine the matchup isn't going to be at least at your lowest. You're probably getting like 8-1. I would imagine the Chiefs are still high on the list, and I would imagine you still have the Bills pretty close to the Ravens. Maybe not too close to the Ravens, but pretty close. I haven't checked the exact odds. And I would imagine for the NFC, Cowboys, Eagles, and Niners are all basically tied at the hip. So your odds are going to be pretty good in my opinion. You could wait because I guess if the Niners don't get the first round bye, their odds could drop a little bit, but I don't think they would drop too much. I think they've given us enough hints between all the underlining issues that they're going into. The fact that it would be a very funny Super Bowl, again, Mr. Irrelevant versus Lamar MVP, is just funny on its own. And the amount of talk that these teams have gotten, and I noticed they do this with Super Bowl teams a lot. Last year was the Chiefs and Eagles. They really talked about the Eagles all year long. Like, they were just like, oh, the Eagles, they're that team. Hurts can't be stopped. The coaching is amazing. That they're a different team. They can't be beaten. And they, sure enough, they made they had the first seed, and they went to the Super Bowl. And then they played the Chiefs, who they were kind of got the Warriors treatment, where they were good, but they weren't being. The Bengals, Bills, all these other teams were being considered just as likely to go. The Chiefs were kind of buried in it. And this year, the Ravens are the team not really getting a lot of talk, I feel like, so they could be the ones who sneak in, even with a great record. Whereas the Niners, they're talking about them every single week, whether they can do this, whether they can do that. So if they're following last year's script, which it seems like they are with Purdy now getting banged up to end the season, it does make a lot of sense to me that one of the teams would be like the obvious one, the Niners. And then the Ravens, who haven't really got the talk that the Chiefs have gotten. They haven't got the talk that the Bills have gotten, or even the Jags. They're just kind of keeping them almost as like an X factor, and I think that's for a reason. So yeah, you got a lot of things. OBJ back in the big spotlight makes a lot of sense, and I just think there's no reason that the Ravens wouldn't do it at this point. And for the NFC, I know a lot of people were saying Cowboys. I know a few people were saying Eagles. I just don't personally see it. I think we see Niners. I think they've been banging on the door. That's another thing. They remind me of the Celtics. They've been banging on the door for so long. I think finally they're going to get to the Super Bowl. And that's why I had them winning it. I think, it just makes sense. Sure, they can get there and lose. It would still be, I guess, somewhat impressive for the fan base to get there. But I think if they get there, they win. But yeah, Lamar, he could certainly do it too, because if they really want to solidify him, they'll give him the MVP. And unlike Hurts, who got the MVP last year, he can get the MVP and the Super Bowl MVP in the same year. Not sure the last time that happened. And then the Chiefs, I haven't really mentioned them for a reason. At the beginning of the year, I didn't even have them making the playoffs. Now, for them to miss the playoffs would require a lot. They would need to basically lose out, which isn't too much because basically they would need to lose this week where they really shouldn't lose. But they'd have to lose to the Bengals. And then it would essentially become them and the Broncos. And as long as the Broncos, they just benched Russ, so I think they're letting us know what they're doing. But it is pretty crazy because it just shows how scripted it is. You bench Russ. If the Broncos win and the Chiefs lose, Broncos beat the Chiefs, they're in the playoffs, the Chiefs are out. It's that simple. So it's interesting they would bench Russ. If you look at everything, just again, they can get in the playoffs with the Chiefs loss. Not that the Chiefs are going to lose to the Bengals. I think in this scripted league, it makes perfect sense for the Bengals to win that game. But the whole thing just seems a little odd to me that they would bench a guy that's doing well when they have made a run and the Chiefs are melting down. Like I said, my preseason prediction of the Chiefs missing the playoffs, probably going to miss. But I'd say we were pretty close. It's going to be the closest they've come to missing the playoffs in quite some time, where they're probably going to get in by a half game or a game, maybe even a tiebreaker. And I don't see them doing much in there. I will say we do have that possible story, which if it's not the Ravens, I'm kind of an extremist. Then I do look at the Chiefs because it reminds me of the Warriors. The years, again, they kind of pushed it where they were like, nobody believed in us. And the Chiefs had done this in both of their Super Bowls, where they're like, oh yeah, nobody believed in us. And everyone thought the Chiefs were going to go. And the year the Warriors did it, they acted like the team wasn't the same. And then they got in as like a 6th seed. And there just wasn't much going on with the Warriors. And then they wound up beating the Celtics. So the Chiefs do seem to be getting those kind of vibes a little bit. So if it's not the Ravens, I know it seems kind of like a cheat. It's like, oh yeah, well obviously those two teams, one of them is very likely. That's why I really am, as they say, 10 toes down on the Ravens. But if it is not the Ravens, then I do think that the Chiefs do stand the reason, just because you have the Mahomes versus the world mentality, where they obviously are pushing this team as just a team that Mahomes, if they didn't have him, they'd probably have a record worse than the Bears. So you have that possibility. But I wanted to go into just a few different reasons I like the Niners-Ravens. I know I've mentioned them a bunch of times. I didn't really go into, again, in the beginning of the year I did, as to why I liked the exact matchup. So I figured I would cover that now as the playoffs are almost upon us. And then again, you throw in all the stuff that's been happening as of late, and I think it makes sense. Now, the reason I'm going into this game is because it's on NBA TV. Why would you put the worst team in NBA history on NBA TV against the best team in the league? Is it so we can watch a complete prison pounding? Or is it possibly, because I've been noticing on ESPN Bet, what they keep doing now is putting out these teases. Oh, if you picked Luka to get 40 points, you would have got 15-1. Oh, if you took the Pacers when they were losing by 18 points, or the Cavs came back today. Oh, if you got in on the Cavs when they were down by 20, you would have got 50-1. They only had a 1% chance of winning. All these different things. So you look at the Pistons, Celtics, and what better way to end the worst losing streak ever than to beat the Boston Celtics, the best team in the league. And it is 13-1 or 11-1. It's moved a little bit, but I still think there's not going to be enough people hammering the Pistons. Yeah, you're gonna have some degenerates like myself that play it because it's enticing. It's over 10-1 odds for a basketball game. Anything can happen, but I don't think there's going to be enough. And with the amount of people that probably chase the Pistons for a while now, and like have been doubling up on them and just doing crazy things, probably Vegas made more than enough to pay them out with a Pistons win. So I think this story writes itself, especially because it's on NBA TV. And then they can put on an NBA bet. Oh, the 8% of people that took the Pistons turned 100 into 1,000. All these different things, like these crypto stories. So, again, you always have to look at the bigger angles. So I like the Pistons a lot more than usual. You would think with it being such a big spread, I would like them less than usual. But I've noticed it seems like a lot of the upsets have been huge upsets. We're not getting these like 6 point upsets. In the NFL, we got some huge upsets, obviously. We just got the biggest upset in Christmas history. So I just figured I'd go into this, touch on this. There's a couple other games I like, but I figured I'd really hit this one because I think it's worth the play. Again, 11-1 does not hurt to throw a unit on the Pistons here for the money line. You could always hedge too if the Pistons get out to an early lead and it even becomes close to even odds. You can always hedge and get a plus 500 guarantee. But I'm just gonna roll with it. I think they're gonna break the losing streak. They've already been shamed. They might as well be wearing paper bags to the game. I think a great way to break that again, it would be in Boston against the Celtics, and the fact that it's on NBA TV is very interesting in my opinion. So I just think it happens. I also look at the scores a lot, and I know it sounds a little goofy, but 12-28 obviously the Pistons can stay on 28, and then if you do vortex math, the 2 and the 1 from the 12 is 3. They can move to 3 and 28. The Celtics would stay on 3, and it's at 7:30. And again, you got the Celtics could move to 7 losses, and you'd have the 3 wins for the Pistons, and the Celtics would stay on 23 wins. So it's kind of right there in plain sight as well. I'm not saying that's for sure. I got gematria goons that come out of the woodwork, get all angry, and they're like, "Oh, that's not how gematria works." And to me, I don't really care. To me, it's not gematria. It's all symbolism. However you want to break it down, whether it's to the prime ordinal of 6 weeks ago, or if it's just numbers like vortex math, where they all just seem to match up with the 28, the 28, the 2, 1, 3. It just all seems to match up to me. And that's something I literally just noticed as I was going into this, because the main reason I like it is the story, again, of the Pistons. And you got the total here at 230. So maybe, again, Boston stays at 223. But again, to me, it's the story of the Pistons getting this ridiculous, unprecedented, probably biggest history in the history of the NBA, biggest win in the history of the NBA win. Again, you see it's first versus last. It just seems to write itself. So yeah, I wanted to go into the Super Bowl, just exactly why I like the Ravens-Niners even more now. But I figured I would cover the Pistons game because it's too good to pass up on. We're going to have a lot of games coming out the next couple days, next couple weeks. The holidays are still upon us. I got Christmas was nice, obviously. We got New Year's coming up. So I figured if I didn't have time, I didn't want to put it out. Like Week 18, obviously, we'll do our playoff picks, like going into the playoffs. But I still like to, in advance, just go into and stand by who I like, why I like them. So I do have like a Super Bowl saga series, I think it is, or it's called something like that, playlist. I'll just probably be adding this to that. But I wanted to go into like the 3 components. You got the race component, you got the symbolism, a lot of symbolism in my opinion, and then the fact that it's a redemption story for both guys. It's a big balance of the teams playing. It's a rematch. It's got a lot tied in with it, in my opinion. So it's just another reason I like both those teams to represent the Super Bowl. And then again, for my wrestling fans, the Brock connection is pretty interesting, especially since I realized Lamar moved to 20-1 again against the NFC. 21-1 would match Undertaker's record, which Brock Lesnar beat, which I just thought was interesting. So a lot of interesting commonalities. That one's kind of a reach, but the rest of them I think are pretty routine, especially when you got Kittle out here talking about the script writers and they put out the script commercials. They definitely know that people understand that it's sports entertainment at this point, and I'm just curious what they do going forward. And that holds true for the NBA, of course, with the 4% chance of the Pistons winning. We'll see what happens. I think there's a good chance they do, so I would definitely lock that in as well. So take care and happy earnings.